If I were to ask you to think of a video game, what would you think of? It's probably something grand and epic, right? Maybe something like Elden Ring or GTA 5. But if you ask your parents the same question, the odds are it wouldn't seem as large as those games. It's no secret that gaming has evolved quickly, but does that mean everything has to be this huge, godlike battle nowadays? For the past month or so, I have played point-and-click games daily. During this process, I have discovered a lot about these games. Point-and-click is such a forgotten genre of game that it really begs the question of whether or not it holds up at all. But to answer that question, we first have to understand what the genre is at its core. You'd all expect the genre to be very straightforward. I mean, it is called point and click. It kind of explains itself, but there is more to it. You probably haven't realized that some of your favorite games are technically point and click. For example, who here in the live studio audience is a fan of horror games? Anyone? Anyone? Oh, you? Yeah, okay, name your favorite.
I don't know. Five Nights at Freddy's.
Point and click. So many popular titles are still point and click, and most people don't even realize that. This is a point and click. So is this. This too. Even this! You see, point and click games don't have to be these puzzle adventure games that you'd all probably imagine. The genre as a whole is free and experimental to an extent. All of those games I showed you rely on just the mouse for gameplay, and they're all drastically different titles. I'd even argue RTS games are point and click. I'm not very well versed in them, but the handful such as Age of Empires, Age of Mythology, and Halo Wars all are only played with the mouse. Even a few turn-based games rely on just the mouse. So to really answer the question of what point and click is quite difficult. It's such a vast game genre with so much growth and history behind it. And if you're watching this video thinking that these games must be easy because you only have to use the mouse to play them, you couldn't be more wrong.
My name is Guybrush Threepwood. Prepare to die.
On the surface, one might think that a game where all you can do is point to something and click on it would be quick and easy. If only that were true. Since these games are older than the average Connor Murray fan, they all lack a tutorial. You see, back then, Steam wasn't around, so older games like this all came on a physical disc, like you'd buy for your Xbox or PlayStation. And inside that case would be a manual detailing the core mechanics of the game and typically the general plot. The typical point-and-click adventure has a handful of different actions for the player to use on an item or environmental object. This ranges from picking up, pushing, looking, or sometimes even eating. All simple enough. The trick here is that it can be quite hard to tell what you can and can't interact with. Like in this room from Monkey Island, for example. Can you guess what item you're supposed to pick up? The bones? Maybe the chalice? How about the chest? It's the rubber chicken with a pulley on it. You see, these older games went further than just not holding the player's hand. They spat on their hand and smacked them away. To understand what you need and how to get it, the player has to be fully aware at all times. Listen to every piece of dialogue, and look at as many things as you possibly can. Multiple times throughout Monkey Island does Guybrush mention and reference a rubber chicken with a pulley. Why? For this one time, you need to use it in the story. I'm not complaining about this, by the way. I don't want you to think that I'm a baby who needs his hand held. I think that forcing the player to rely on context and subtle hints is a great thing. It keeps the player engaged and experimental. I will, however, say that most of these games do have puzzles that someone is quite unlikely to solve without a guide. For this example, let's use Harvester. During the first night in Harvest, Steve is tasked with scratching a car, and that's all. So, most players would do just that and nothing else. And then in the morning, they learn of the disappearance of a poor little girl. Little do they know that if they were to venture into the graveyard for whatever reason the night prior, they would catch Mr. Potsdam filling in a grave. If you decide to dig up the hidden grave, the little girl will be saved. The devs just want the player to fully explore and test everything. While playing these games, I've learned the true power of save scumming, and I think they fully intended, maybe even hoped, that players would abuse this. An average playthrough for these games with a guide is about 5 to 6 hours. But for anyone crazy enough to play without a guide, the playtime would probably skyrocket to 10 to maybe even 15. I should also preface that I am just bad at these games as a whole. Something about them just confuses me. I think I overthink them sometimes. If you thought the puzzle games were hard, wait till you see what Fallout 1 is like. This game makes you feel like an actual vault dweller being sent into the wasteland. You know literally nothing and are constantly getting lost. Now, of course, you could read the manual to at least understand the controls, but after that, you're alone. It's up to you to figure out who to trust, different fighting tactics, and where to even go. Man, gamers were built differently back in the 90s. And these developers must have been on some crazy shit, because these games are freaky. I've noticed throughout multiple forms of art and expression that most have become less creative and experimental. Modern art has been getting trashed on for years for how bland and empty it is. Newer houses being built all look the exact same and have next to no personality. Even the way most people dress is exactly the same as the rest. Gaming isn't safe from this epidemic either. People will see a certain type of game do well and then immediately jump on that bandwagon. Remember back in 2016 when Battle Royales were getting traction? Do you also remember the number of games that try to do something similar for profit? I do. It's one thing to exist in the same genre, but when it's obviously just a cash grab with no soul behind it, the player can tell. I'm not asking people to reinvent the wheel, just make it their own. And that's exactly what point-and-click games would do. They all feel and look entirely unique. Even in today's standards, these are weird games. A story about a supercomputer that became an evil godlike entity, torturing the final remaining humans. A little boy fixing war and spreading peace, all while learning about the different food groups. Or even just a goofy pirate adventure, where the main combat system is hurling insults at your opponent. You don't see games like this anymore, and it's truly a shame. I won't sit here and say that all newer titles aren't unique. Indie developers are kicking stronger than ever, with incredible titles such as Animal Well and Balatro, which is technically point and click by the way. Games like those are beautiful works of art, but if I see one more hero/tax shooter, I'm gonna scream. I shouldn't blame the devs for this issue, however. They would probably prefer to create something more meaningful, fun, and just overall creative than these repetitive games that will most likely be dead within a couple of years. Big name studios are, once again, the root of this problem, destroying all forms of art and identity from clothing, music, movies, and our beloved video games. Fallout is a great example of this. The first game has a very distinct feeling to it. The wasteland feels genuinely scary, and you feel helpless wandering around. Tim Kaine created this world of desolation and destruction, full of pain, death, and constant war. Todd Howard saw this and thought that a more colorful, smooth look would fit the game better. What kind of ritual do I have to perform to get another game as weird and freaky as Sanitarium? I want my jaw to drop when looking at my screen. Not because the graphics are so realistic, but because what I'm looking at is so different and new. Confusion and discomfort are good things in media. Too many suits are afraid to allow the artists that they have under contract to reach these places nowadays. The biggest risk that they will allow is for some wacky ass cosmetics that typically cost like $10. Hopefully, I speak for everyone when I say that we need more weird shit in our video games. When I call these games story-driven, I don't mean like a game like Last of Us or Final Fantasy. These games are almost all story. Since the gameplay is so bare bones and simple, there was plenty more time for the story to be crafted and perfected. Before anyone starts to comment that these newer games have just as good or even better stories and gameplay, you gotta understand the period that these games were released in. Technology was not nearly as advanced as it is today, so to be quite frank, they couldn't focus on the gameplay as much. I mean, Doom was released at the end of '93, and that was one of a kind back then. My point is, these games have fun, engaging, unique, and sometimes even powerful stories behind them. I could talk about I Have No Mouth again, but since that's an actual short story, I think that'd be cheating. So let's look at Harvester one more time. This horror show of the game is about an 18-year-old boy named Steve, waking up confused and lost. He has amnesia. He doesn't remember his family, fiance, or even his hometown. He questions his family about it and they simply brush it off as another joke of his.
Do you believe me?
Well, you always were a kidder, Steve.
He goes to meet his fiance and she happens to be experiencing something similar. Long story short, you're told to join the Lodge, a cult that runs the town and is very difficult to join. You blackmail your way into getting an invitation to the Lodge, and then the cult tells you to prove your worth by performing petty pranks on the other citizens. It starts innocent, but quickly turns to arson, causing a poor single mother to take her own life. This act finally allows you to join the Lodge, and things only get weirder from there. This game is a trip, with a ton of strange, graphic twists and turns, ensuring your constant attention. You're not going to find a story like this anymore, and to be honest, it doesn't fit any other game genre. This wouldn't work as an RPG, turn-based, or anything. It only makes sense as a point and click. Not to mention the many different paths and endings that you can discover. It all comes back around to experimenting. The majority of these stories have countless different ways you can beat them and experience them. I'm beating a dead horse at this point, so to condense it all to one simple sentence, the developers didn't have to worry about designing 20 different armor sets or boss attack animations. They were more concerned with creating 20 different dialogue options to help progress the story and immerse the player in the world that they created.
Here we'll make others of the master race and ensure the unity.
Creators in the 90s were very intrigued with the idea of merging real life with digital. You had movies like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Space Jam, and of course, the Brad Pitt classic Cool World. The video game world was no different. A good majority of these P&C adventure games use real people for the sprites. It was kind of similar to how motion capture works in today's video games. The main difference is that this was done in stop motion. This technique was great for keeping immersion high when swapping from gameplay to cutscene. For example, the original Monkey Island had realistic cutscenes, but 16-bit gameplay, which at the time was quite nice to look at, but doesn't hold up as well as some of the others. I will say before moving past Monkey Island that the special edition, which I played, did turn the game a lot more cartoony, which wasn't horrible, just caught me off guard to see that the classic had real human models for these characters. If the games did not shoot for a realistic approach, odds are they went with something more stylized, like Pajama Sam, a game series targeting a child audience. It wouldn't have made sense to have a real child in his pajamas running around on these wild adventures, so going all in on the cartoon style fits perfectly. A less noticeable example would be Sanitarium. Well, yes, the game isn't as cartoonish, it's still in its own style. You couldn't realistically design horrors like this. It just wouldn't work. Maybe it's just nostalgia speaking, but these games look great in their own unique way. I know I've complained a lot about modern games, but I gotta do it one more time. Because too many games try to look like real life way too often. And once again, it's primarily a AAA issue. I'm not saying that every game has to look cartoonish or anything like that. I'm just saying that I miss when games had more personality to their designs and style. Because I can easily tell the difference between Black Ops 2 and classic MW3. But now, when I look at Black Ops Cold War and the new MW2, it becomes so much harder to spot the difference. Now, let me show you 2 point-and-click games made by the same studio only 2 years apart. Notice how each has its own look and style to it? Okay, maybe Call of Duty wasn't a great example, so how about Fallout 4 and Fallout 76? Years in between these two games' releases, and the biggest difference I can spot is the color of the HUD. And we know Bethesda isn't afraid to change this franchise's art style because it used to look so dark and grim, and now it looks like this. But since I've already complained about that, let's move on and explore why we don't see point-and-click games like this anymore. Everything I've said about these games makes you wonder why they hardly exist anymore. Well, hopefully you're wondering that. And well, the answer isn't very profound. Games just evolved. To be quite frank, not many of these point-and-click adventure games were very popular to begin with. With new and better technology being created every year, it was bound to happen. Consoles were definitely a huge factor as well, because I don't know if you've ever tried to use a cursor with a controller, but it is not fun. Consoles were much better for RPGs, shooters, racing games, literally anything besides a point and click. Besides the hardware advancements, these games just weren't as casual and enjoyable to a younger audience. The puzzles were either too hard or sometimes the games were just too graphic. The majority were clearly meant for a more mature player base, which is fine. They just won't bring in as much money. Puzzle games as a whole are just less profitable compared to a faster-paced genre. A simple game genre with a simple downfall. I can't think of anything more fitting. Even though these games are all older than I am, I can still understand and feel the passion put into them. Good games don't ever truly fall off or disappear. Fans will always talk about them and remember them fondly, especially games that are as confusing, fun, and weird as these. So go and replay that game you loved as a kid and relive the simpler times in gaming. Before you do that though, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this video. It was a lot of fun to make and even just play the games themselves. A list of every game I played / used for footage will be in the description below if any of it piques your interest. Thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. What the fuck is this, man? What?
That's gonna be annoying to keyframe. Anyway, thank you all for watching. I just want to take a second to apologize for the delay between the uploads. Just kind of happened. I don't know, I lost a lot of motivation to just work on the video as a whole. No clue why. But we're good. We're back. We're making videos. So the next one should not take as long as this one did, but no promises. I have been live streaming more a lot. If you'd like to watch that also. Just a lot of variation of games, so check out that. I have a Discord server, so you can get constant updates, because I'm not good at posting a YouTube community. It's a weird thing. I don't really like it. So Discord is below if you'd like to join that. Thank you guys again. Just wanted to take a second, heart to heart, to say thank you and sorry for the long wait. Hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you guys enjoy the next one as well. Peace.